Welcome to my channel. There are many different types of relationships in which neglect can take place, including those between parents and their children and those between adults and their friends and family. Because of the apparent power disparity that exists between parents and children, children are more at risk of being neglected. There is a lack of effort on the part of parents to listen to and comprehend their children. A love partner, on the other hand, can neglect you at the same time. Even they are capable of overlooking your requirements, therefore it's feasible. First, let's understand. What is emotional neglect? There are numerous sorts of neglect. Physical neglect is the most common kind of abuse. It's possible for someone to be injured, unsafe, or starve to death as a result of being physically ignored. Such a thing should never happen to anyone, and those who do it even disregard others in the physical sense. However, emotional abuse is distinct. In comparison, it's a lot more difficult to detect. Mentally neglecting others can go unnoticed even by the individual who is performing it. That doesn't help the situation at all. Regardless of your motives, you should never harm or abuse somebody. Neglecting the emotional needs and desires of others is the definition of emotional neglect. Or, to put it another way, emotional neglect is ignoring someone so much that they don't get what they need from you. Never asking your partner what you can do to make their day easier is an example of neglecting your partner. For example, it could imply that you never seek their input on major life decisions, such as large purchases. Children are significantly more vulnerable to abuse and neglect than adults are. There is never any time set aside for a youngster who has been emotionally neglected by their parents. They entrust them to a nanny for the duration of the day. They don't even take the time to look at their own drawing, for example. They start them off with a slew of tasks at an early age and overload them. Children who are emotionally neglected grow up to face a lifetime of challenges because their normal growth has been stifled by emotional neglect. In the end, people who are constantly ignored or undervalued will always believe that they aren't good enough. People are affected by neglect at all times, not just when it is happening. Even after the abuse is finished, the effects of trauma and scarring will last a lifetime. The reality is that kids have very little to do when they're living with their parents. There are just a few people who can help youngsters in distress, and these are their own family members. Adults, on the other hand, necessitate an adult approach. You begin by making a conscious effort to study the warning signs and how to avoid being abused. 3 warning signs of emotional abuse that you should be on the lookout for are as follows. Sign number 1. People who are neglected have difficulty expressing their feelings. Neglect is like yelling for aid in the middle of a deserted field, as everyone who has experienced it knows all too well. Nothing will be heard no matter how loud you shout. As a result, you eventually give up. Ultimately, you accept your fate. Neglect of one's emotions has the same effect. No one seems to care about what you have to say or what your needs are. It doesn't appear as though your well-being is a priority. The more you feel ignored, the more likely you are to believe that you are the source of your own neediness. You begin to believe that your emotions are a burden that must be concealed to the greatest extent possible. Your self-esteem plummets as a result of your inability to openly express your emotions. It is a red flag if one of your friends or family members blocks you out. It's reasonable to be suspicious if you ask someone how they're feeling and they make every effort to avoid answering you. Remember, too, that if you're the one being ignored, it's important to be able to express your feelings. No one should ever feel ashamed of having desires and needs. It's just a normal part of life. Cut them out of your life if they don't respect your feelings. Sign number 2. People feel numb when they are mistreated emotionally. There are few things more devastating than being a victim of neglect. All forms of emotional abuse are, of course, harmful. Emotional abuse, on the other hand, tends to keep you trapped and close to madness. You're not enraged by it. As a result, you begin to feel unwelcome and unappreciated. There is a sense of indifference and detachment. And this isn't just an emotional reaction. A tangible manifestation can be seen. The numbness spreads across your entire body. A weight has been lifted from your shoulders, and a void has been left behind. When you've been ignored for a long time, you eventually lose interest. You stop putting forth the effort to be noticed and heard. You begin to doubt your own ability to defend yourself, and as a result, you give up. After a while, you'll notice that you're no longer experiencing any strong feelings. You're left feeling numb and apathetic. Stop giving a damn about yourself or anyone else. It's possible that you're unhappy because you don't believe you deserve to be. Or it could be a self-preservation strategy to keep you safe from harm in the future. When people are deprived of attention, they experience a brief moment of happiness, but it appears to be a false hope, and they lose up on their efforts to be happy. If this sounds like you, you need to get in touch with a psychologist right away. It's also a red indicator if you know someone who appears to have stopped trying, and that could be a symptom of neglect. Sign number 3. People who have been neglected have a hard time trusting others. They have a hard time thinking that anyone truly cares about them because they've been missed and ignored so frequently. It's frustrating to be ignored since it feels like you're to blame. If only you'd done anything differently, perhaps they'd care about you. But you don't believe that anyone can see and understand you because of how devastated you feel. You don't want to put yourself at risk of making a new friend only to have them disregard and push you aside later. As a result of being overlooked, many people believe that they are disposable and have an unrealistically low opinion of themselves. Because they don't believe they are worth it, these are the folks who refuse to do anything for themselves. Disenfranchised people will do everything they can to avoid socializing and gatherings. They have a hard time putting their faith in others because they are afraid of being dependent on them. Throughout their lives, they've been hurt and forgotten about by others. They don't want to find themselves in the same position again. People who aren't cared for emotionally learn to be independent and take care of themselves. Plus, if they are in this kind of situation right now, they don't have the emotional strength to trust new people. Don't just ignore it if you know someone who shuts you down and seems to not trust people. What you are seeing could be someone calling for help. Last words on understanding the red flags that reveal emotional neglect. Emotional neglect is so bad that no one should ever have to deal with it. It happens a lot more than anyone would like to admit, though. People forget about other people because they are selfish, too busy, or don't care enough about them. The person who is being careless doesn't have much to lose by doing so. Those who have been ignored, on the other hand, may never fully recover from the harm they have suffered. Unfortunately, even among children, abuse and neglect are all too widespread. Parents are so busy with their employment or other pursuits that they don't have time to spend with their children. If you don't meet their needs, they'll have a detrimental impact on their growth. Neglect occurs in all kinds of relationships, including romantic and social ones. People who have been neglected have to deal with this suffering on a daily basis. So they will have a difficult time speaking and expressing their feelings. They won't be able to articulate their emotions since they don't think they're relevant to the situation. Or, they may even have a sense of numbness and emptiness. Because they don't want to be harmed again, people who have been neglected have a hard time trusting others. It could also be because they have a low self-esteem and believe they are unlovable. Make an effort to aid if you see any of these warning signs. Thank you for watching.